and I have the impression that it is one of the issue that changed more with time, with the context in the different societies, in the different economical situations. And so we give this name risk to a plenty of things, and maybe we do not have, not even the same, we do not consider it in the same way. For example, we are 6 people here now. What do you think about risk? Do you think it is something positive, negative, to avoid, to, if possible, to embrace? What is the first thing that you think when it comes about risk? Is a positive word, is a negative one?
I think the first thing that it's negative.
Can you repeat? Sorry.
Yeah, I think that the first impression is negative for
negative.
me.
Yeah. Other voices?
For me, I kind of, my whole life I have thought that it's something negative, but then I started doing these social change, disruptive design courses, and then I see risk as a challenge, as an opportunity to change. So it has, in my mind, it has shifted the idea of risk. And that's why I got very excited about this talk, because I think risk, it's a way of discovering things.
And actually we come from a period in our countries, more or less, during which risk has been at the center of the attention. We had to protect from the risk of being contaminated by the virus. We have to protect the others from the risk of being ourselves the taker of the virus, even if we do not know. So there were risks we couldn't even perceive, and that was part of the complex issue of this corona crisis, as some of you call it. And so maybe we could start from the first one of the first thing we have discussed during the course, which is complex systems have to change. They cannot avoid changing. And part of this change is not predictable. Part of as the systems are interconnected, we cannot really predict totally what is going to happen. So there is a part of unpredictability, there is a part of uncertainty, and we have to coexist. We have to deal with it, not only to coexist, but we have to deal with it. We have to manage. And actually, if we could imagine, we could say, okay, risk comes from the fact that we have to change. Let's imagine what would happen if we found a way to stay alive without any change, without changing nothing, never. Would the risk be canceled? So probably you nod. So probably there would simply be another kind of risk, but but the fact of having to deal with risk would remain. So what can we do actually? We can, when we do not know what to do, the point is actually what put us in a situation of risk is the fact that we do not know what to do. And the reason why we don't know what to do is that the change is happening too fast. So it is not the problem of changing in itself, but maybe it is the speed of the change that put some risk, because we do not have enough time to understand. We do not have enough time to observe what is going on. We do not have enough time to change things in another direction. So what is probably interesting for us is that risk, in a way or in another, is part of what we call life. Every single day and every single moment, we risk something. And there are some big risks, some very evident risks that become very clear in some situation, like in the one we are now. The risk is to get sick, to die, to suffer physically. And the reason why it seems very, very important, the risk, is that everything was happening very close to us and very quickly. The damage and the disruption that the climate change is very likely to bring in our life is for sure much powerful than what the coronavirus did. But it is not happening fast. It is not happening soon. It is not happening close to us in many situations. So we do not perceive the risk as something there, something we have to deal with soon now. And this is what actually Greta Thunberg was saying more than once, because she said we should behave as if someone, an engineer, an architect, came to our house and say, you know, this house is going to crash on your head, so run outside. And we ran outside soon, immediately. We wouldn't wait. We wouldn't, when we feel that there is an earthquake, we ran outside immediately. We don't stay there to say, well, let's discuss about what to do. We go out. Because we know that whatever we are risking, it will happen very soon, very fast. With the climate change, at least in the rich countries, we do not perceive the change very present, very soon, very close. We do not have the perception of the risk. So that make us also enable to react. And one of the important thing that we have to do with risk is to set up a reactive mode. What the nature does, what are the risks that nature can run? The risk of species disappearing, or ecosystem becoming unfertile or toxic. And the reason and the way in which nature reacts to the risk is actually biodiversity, is preparing itself to be as flexible as possible, to be as reactive as possible. The idea of resilience that we have used so many times in these weeks, we have listened to so many people talking about resilience in these days, actually is very close to the idea of flexibility, the possibility of going back, getting back to the shape you had after a shock, and is very linked to the idea of time, to the concept of time. You have a higher resilience if the time you need to go back to the shape you had is short, and you have a lower resilience if the time you need is long or is forever. I mean, if you if you bring back the word resilience to its which is the physics of materials, there are materials that will never get back to their shape after a shock. Think about wood or glass or bricks. So also the risk, the idea of risk is linked to the fact that we live in time. So we do not actually know very well what is going to happen. The idea of future, more precisely, is what put us in the kingdom of risk. We are not able to predict all what is going to happen in the future, in the near future and in the far one. We can have some forecasts and we can have some foresight. Do you see which is the difference that you can see between the idea of forecasting and foresighting?
Can you maybe explain the question?
Yes, I just wanted to see if we have, there are two different things that we do about future. One is forecasting and the other one is foresighting. And the difference between these two possibilities is again about time. We can have foresight in a medium period. We can have forecasting in a longer or in a very immediate period. But the point is that those are not enough.
Maybe write the two options.
Sure.
Because I don't understand completely the word.
Hope the spell is correct, but I think so. So the point is that we actually, once we know something that can happen very soon or very in a far future, that is not enough because we need to know what to do. And what to do means that we must anticipate. Once we have to know what is going to happen is not enough if we do not translate this information in a behavior. So the point is not enough that we know that tomorrow is raining. What is the important thing to do is to get out with an umbrella in any case, even if when we go out it is not raining. If we get out with an umbrella, we'll avoid the surprise, which is one of the most important component of the negative part of the risk. If we try to have some anticipatory behavior, we'll find some protection, not from the risk itself, not from what will happen, but from what will happen to us if we'll be surprised by the event. And in fact, if we see to what has happened with the corona crisis, we see that in many situations, many countries, they did have some forecast, they did have some foresight. Scientists and even writers wrote about the possibility of spillover, the possibility of pandemics in 2012. I mean, not yesterday. The idea that being more and more invasive with environments that were meant to be wild, and the fact that humans go closer and closer, kept interacting with this wildness, was very likely to bring to some spillover. We knew that, and we had already experimented it in many situations, like the HIV or other situation. We knew what was possible, but we didn't. None of the countries did something to build an anticipatory behavior. Why? Because the anticipatory behavior should be built in a situation in which citizens do not perceive the risk. And if they do not perceive the risk, they have a different hierarchy of priority. So in a country in which the risk is not perceived, politicians will not be elected if they propose anticipatory behaviors like protecting biodiversity, avoiding the invasion of the wilderness, keep the nature safe, keep sound the public system, the public health system, having some safe action about what is produced in your country in the field of the emergency needs. So the reason, one of the most interesting way of saying when we describe an exaggerate behavior or a risky behavior is that this person or this country or whatever does that thing as there wasn't a tomorrow, which is a very clear way to describe how you can cancel any anticipatory behavior from your landscape. You act, you spend your money, you drink, you eat, you whatever, as if there wasn't a tomorrow. But tomorrow is there. Tomorrow will arrive. And if you didn't try to find a protective and anticipatory situation, your country, your company, yourself as an individual will be surprised by the event. And in this case, you will not be able to manage the risk. Any comment? What are you thinking? Any experience, any idea of how this is linked with your life, with your real life?
I think the way that you describe risk is really similar to the way that I think about uncertainty. I was wondering, risk has a lot of also economic kinds of attached meanings to it, whereas uncertainty might feel more like social or quotidian or everyday. And so what is the relationship between, on the one hand, risk, and on the other hand, uncertainty, and how do these interact?
I'm not sure I understand what you ask. You're asking about the link between uncertainty and economic behaviors?
Uncertainty and risk. Risk
And
is
risk.
kind of this terminology of, I see it as a more linked to kind of economic terminology.
No.
Risk.
You're asking
and then,
if they are two different things or it's the same thing, risk and uncertainty. Well, actually, uncertainty is unpredictability of the system in which you are, is part of what you have to deal with, knowing. But one thing that you can probably include in what you don't know, but you don't know what is, but you will perfectly know that there will come, is the risk. Because changing is mandatory for a complex system, in economy, in nature, in relationship, whatever. We can bring this very close to us. We can bring to a relationship. Of course, we decide today that we get married with someone. That thing will change. Whatever we have, it will change. How are we? This is the only thing we know, but we don't have any knowledge about the way in which it will change. It can change very rapidly because something can happen that we cannot absolutely adapt to it. And so the rapidity of the change will add complexity to our need of managing it. But at that point, maybe all what we know from the past, the majority of our knowledge comes from experience, comes from the past. And maybe in this situation, the majority of what we know is not useful, is not immediately useful, unless we are not able to track the trends of the change. But in an individual situation of relationship, we don't have a number of we cannot build a big data system. And when we have this access of incertitude, we need rapidly to understand what to do. And because we feel that the way in which our future is changing shape, and that means that we were imagining our future in a way, and we cannot keep imagining that in that way. We know that because the conditions changed. But in this situation, it is that future, that uncertain future, that is changing the present. So something that is not there yet is actually change what we have. And this looks like a paradox, but we have to deal with. If we put this in a social system, in a political system, we understand how complex and difficult is that job, the job of being the mayor, or being the president of a country, or being the one that needs to react promptly to something which is completely unknown, because it is new, and because I mean, I talk about Italy now. In Italy, in the last 30 years, all the health, we have a very strong and public sanitary system, health system. Whoever in Italy must be taken in care by the public system. But the private system got more and more power, economic power, in the last 30 years. What does it mean? It means that we still have laws that say that our hospital must take care of everybody, but the majority of the cuts, the saving, the cutting jobs, and so on, happened in the public system. So the public system, which was the only one who could react, because it was the only one who was in charge of it, but also was the only one who had enough knowledge to react, enough also technology to react, was also the one with less resources. So we didn't have enough intensive therapy places, bed, and we have to react very quickly, and nothing was enough quick in that moment. So many people have died because we couldn't adapt in the right time to a situation that became real. From being a risk, an hypothetical risk, it became real in a too short time. You know the story of the frog in the hot water. If you put a frog in a boiling water, it will probably escape from the pot very quickly and will save its life. If you put a frog in a pot of cold water, and it gets warmer and warmer until the frog will be confused, and then probably it will get asleep, you will succeed in cooking the frog, because it will, in the moment in which it will have the perfect knowledge that it's dying, it will be not reactive enough to do something, because it will be confused and damaged already by the worm. So that is used, this story, to describe how the very slow change are normally not considered, and And so people do not react, and they end up being seriously damaged by the situation, while the very quick change bring people to react immediately and maybe to save their life. But the point is that, for example, the climate change is happening very slowly, so we do not really perceive that we are in a problem, or air pollution, or for example, the fact that in Italy we have been weakening the health system very slowly, very step by step, without creating any trauma, and so the society didn't react. This is what we have experienced today. We have experienced that our health system is weak, but we didn't experience that it was getting weaker. And so we we ended up being the victims of this of our of the system, and of the way in which we have been kept in it. When it comes about food, for example, the idea of risk has changed very much in the last, let's say, 70 years. We passed from a situation in which the risk and the food were linked, because you could risk of not having food. That was the main risk that people could think about food, or you could risk to have the wrong food. You know, the difference between food security and food safety. Those are two different kind of risk. From one side, you don't have enough food, and so that is a risk. And from the other side, you have your food, but you don't have you cannot be sure that that food will not kill you anyway, even if you eat enough, because it is contaminated, or it is the wrong one, or it's too fat, or it is full of sugar, because the industrial process has made it dangerous for your body and for the society. On this side, on the side of safety, we have plenty of laws. All the hygiene laws have been created, have been thought in order to manage and to prevent the risk, the safety risk for food. So the HACCP system has been designed for that. So in Europe, producers, they have to observe their system of production. They have to say, okay, my point of risk are these, and this is how they have to write down saying how they decide, how they think they can manage the risk, they can avoid the risk. So it is a very responsibility-based system. So you don't have a law that tells you do that, don't do that, but you have a law that say, okay, which is which are the risky point in your process, describe them and tell us how are you planning to prevent the risk. And why do we have plenty of lows? Because that risk is very close, and the damage that it could create is very big and very quick. So if you eat a contaminated food, the problems will arrive soon. Why don't we have that plenty of laws about the food security? Because food security the food insecurity brings a different kind of risk. It's slower, it's farther, it doesn't affect people from one second to the other, but it can be, it is like the frog in the cold water. And also, we do not have laws about the countries that do not grant the food security. Even if the right to food has been written down in any possible document, international and treaties and whatever, but you don't have a law in a country that say, okay, if someone starves, the president will go in jail, or the mayor, or the public official. No one will be punished for people starving. And so we perceive this risk in a different way, and we react in a very different way. So it is, this is this is not an exhaustive conference about risk, but I like to introduce the theme because I think that we all need to deal and to think about risk and to see how we tend to consider some risks more important than other, and in general we tend to consider the risks that are dealing with profit and money more important than others. If something will put at risk a company or a very profitable situation, will react immediately. Another example could be, you know that in Italy, and maybe in your countries too, I don't know, in Italy we had a lot of raw milk dispensers in the town, in many towns we had it. And about 10 years ago, they were really successful and people loved it. They were very happy to go there with their bottle and bring the raw milk at home. And once they had the raw milk at home, they will decide what to do with it. They could cook it, they would drink as it was. The producers that put the raw milk in the dispenser, they had an entire system of dedicated laws in order to ensure that the milk was sterile, that everything would. So that success became a problem for the big companies of pasteurized milk, because the dispenser, the dispenser systems arrived to cover the 18% of the fresh milk market, which was huge, a huge percentage. At that point, all the companies that were mainly corporate started a war against the raw milk dispensers. And they succeed involving the politicians, the politics, the ministry, and on what they succeeded, they were successful. And we now have very few dispensers in Italy. I don't know how it is. But the point on which they insisted was precisely the health risk. And they started saying that raw milk was dangerous, was something absolutely dangerous because it could contain the Escherichia coli and all this kind of thing. And the paradox in a country like Italy, in a region like Piedmont, where we eat raw meat, was that they were successful. We eat raw meat, we eat raw carrots. Carrots are in the ground. The Escherichia coli is something that is in the manure of the cows or the animals. So it's much likely you can find it in the ground than in the milk. The milk that comes out from a cow is sterile, and you can contaminate it later if your hands are dirty, if your machineries are dirty, if your bottle are dirty. But in any case, you will never find. So what they succeeded in doing is to put a warning on the machines, on the dispenser, that say this product must be boiled before being consumed, which was a way to scare the consumers and also to discourage the producers that had been obliged to do so many more things in order to bring the milk there, and then you bring the raw milk there, and then they were obliged to say to the consumers, boil it before drinking. And cook it before eating is not written in the butcheries where we buy raw meat. Cooking before eating is not written in the vegetable shops where we buy carrots or potatoes or whatever else. But the raw milk was becoming dangerous, was becoming a problem for the big milk companies, and so the war started. So also the idea of risk can be manipulated. And in Italy, we had a law created by 3 ministers, environment, agriculture, and health, that signed together this law that they had to put this adhesive on the dispenser saying boil before drinking. And you know, when it comes about bacteria, when it comes about microbes, I mean, what should we do? Should we boil our friends, boyfriends and girlfriends before touching them? Because that is we have on that point we have risky behavior. We need risky behavior every day. We need to have it. And we saw during this lockdown how heavy it has been, all this what is called social distancing. Do you have this kind of definition in your languages? In Italian is called distanziamento sociale. And we had to follow these rules. It was actually risky because one thing that made everything more complicated was the fact that the asymptomatic possibility of being a vector of this illness. So I myself, when I'm talking with you, I could be I could be contaminated and I couldn't know. So if I go to visit my mother, which is in her 90s or almost, I don't kiss my mother since the beginning of May, which is something that is heavy to do. And so how many other risks are connected to that? If we do not touch each other anymore, if we do not hug each other anymore, there are other risks. And so what we want to do is now we want that someone tells us when it will stop. When can I greet someone shaking his hand, or I can restart? And we'll probably restart. We in Italy more sooner than others, I think, because we cannot stop touching people and being somehow invasive of space, physical space. But it is something that it is interesting to think. So we have to decide, maybe in many situations, many more situations that we think, to decide which risk do we want to manage with, do we want to deal with. But one or the other will be probably chosen. I'm talking with you now, I'm risking that I don't risk to contaminate you with my I don't know if I'm symptomatic or not, but I'm risking to not understand them clearly. If you like this lesson, if you would be more participative if we were in presence, and maybe if we are actually drinking a glass of wine together, maybe we could have so many ideas more and interaction more. So it is an interesting issue. I think of my preferred ones. This is why I'm here. So tell me some comments from your side.
I have a question. What are your thoughts about this concept of risk management?
Which concepts?
In economics, in businesses, like this idea of risk management is this concept is very tight. And I don't think that has to do with anything that you're saying now, because I do think that risks are more fluid, or I don't know.
I think it has to do. Risk management is something that you should be, if possible, you should be able to preview. But if you don't, you should be quick to react. So when it is a business, I am also very interested in this business model that now we are all learning to do, and it is normally the business model is about which is the problem, how can I solve it, who will be my customer segment, and which is the added value that I give them, and which will be the resource that I need, and which will be the activities, the main activities.
Can you maybe repeat it?
Pardon, I didn't hear you well.
Can you maybe repeat the stages that you just said?
Well, they're not actually stages, but they are situations that you have to connect when you design a business model, which is the problem that you want to solve, who has this problem first, which is the problem that they have, and how you are planning to solve it, which are the resource that you have, which are the resource that you want to get from, which is the business, the cash flow that you will get from it. You have to define very well your sector, the sector of your customers, and all the activity, the added value that you can give them, and so on. But if the point suddenly change, if the situation change, which is one of the risks of a business, how will you react? This is the risk management. So you plan. Life is, there was a movie a few years ago that says life is what happened while you're doing plans. And this is actually the point with the risk, because things happen and you couldn't preview everything. And so you must be very ready, very flexible, very, you should, in a company, in a team, the one who observe the change arriving, that is the one who will be able to manage a risk. It can at least alarm the others. And so if the change is arriving, the business model has to change if they want to stay alive, if they want to keep to being on the market. So I think that in general, it works in the same way. The risk management in a company and the risk management in your life. I think that should stay. And still, I think that we do not have to put the idea of risk in the negative part, because the idea of risk is the idea of being alive. So we have to, from one side, we do not have to stress the system too much, but also we have to learn how to live together with the risk, and how to choose step by step which is the risk you want to avoid and which is the risk you will accept, and try to change for it, or to manage. More comments?
I wanted to ask about I'm still stuck in the raw milk issue, and I'm trying to understand if it has anything. Of course, it says here following the rules of the European Union, the hygiene standard or the laws. But I'm wondering if that was the only reason, or there could be other reasoning to how milk is managed and taxed, like put into like taxation of milk, especially because here in Italy the cheese culture is very much rich, and I'm trying to think around those reasons, and I'm wondering if that was the same reason, that was the only reason. What was the reason for those laws?
So the reason was the external, the apparent reason was the one I told you about hygiene. The real problem was that economically that was becoming very profitable for the producers, because it was a direct sell. So producers could sell 1 liter for €1, and all that €1 was going to them. While when they sold the milk to the companies, they were paid 27 cents per liter, and then the pasteurized milk in the supermarket was sold at 1.5 euro. So the majority of the money was not going to the producers. So the producers were very happy to follow more strict laws and regulations if they could sell their milk directly as raw milk. But that was really growing very fast, and people was shifting, consumers were shifting from the pasteurized and supermarket milk to the dispensers. But the percentage in general were still very much in favor in quantity of the big industries. So what the producers normally did was to address a tiny part of their production to the dispenser, following the rules for the dispensers, and the huge majority of the milk they had with their quantity of cows, they kept selling to the industry. So the industries had this big tool of power in their hand, because they start saying, you know what, if you keep selling, they wrote letters, very violent letters to the producers, saying, if you keep selling your milk, that 10% of your milk directly, I will stop to collect the 90% of your milk that I'm collecting now. And that was absolutely impossible to manage for the producers. So the point was actually that they were gaining power and room in the cells, in the sellings, and this was immediately the milk industry decided to react, to create this situation of fear among the consumers, saying that the raw milk was unsafe, they would kill their kids, and it was absolutely dangerous, and in a totally irrational way, because even if you believe that the raw milk is dangerous, it's enough if you boil it. You don't have to stop buying it from the dispenser, knowing that buying from there is a direct sale that will go in favor of the producer. But it was so a press campaign. The press had a very strong role in that, because they campaigning in favor of the industrialized pasteurized milk, saying that the raw milk was dangerous. And even if, yes, you're right, Italy has a long story and a strong story of raw milk cheeses, but you know that in the process of making cheese, all the problem of raw milk are enabled, because the seasoning will cancel any problem. And even if they knew that in the story of the health problem coming from dairy products, only the industries have been involved. All the listeria contamination, for example, never came from the small producers of cheese, but always came from the big industries of dairy products. But it was really a season, very short and intense season of irrational campaigning against raw milk.
Can I add something on the milk thing? Because here in the Netherlands, it's a little bit the same. We also have, of course, a very big dairy lobby. And so here in all of the country, it's forbidden to sell raw milk, and no shops are allowed to sell it. The only way you can sell it or can buy it is straight from the farmer, and you have to tap it straight out of the tanks from where the cows are milked. And the people that are selling you have to tell you that you have to cook it before you drink it. So it's a sort of, I have a small farmer which has like grass eating cows, and you feel almost like you have to go to a drugs dealer to get your raw milk. It's so far away, pushed in this corner of
Yes.
not accessibility. Yeah, it's weird. It's a weird.
Yes. And then nobody tell you that if you drink 3 cans of Coca-Cola per day, the level of sugar in your blood will be somehow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. So, which is the risk? Which is perceived as a risk? The way in which the kids are fed through industrial soft drinks, or the raw milk. So this is how the perception of risk is a very wide sector to investigate.
I think it also, like, just to tap in, has so much to do exactly with what is perceived in the media and the stories we tell and what we make visible in our societies. And in that sense, I also wanted to tap into this terminology of this frog in the water, because I do feel that, Al Gore also used this for
the climate change issue.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
And I mean, it's a very cool story because it makes something very visible, but I also feel that somehow in the construct of society that we have right now, we have lost our ways of being attentive to our surroundings. We don't know what it is to look at the grass and see that it's turning yellow, and that is not normal, because we don't think about the grass that much anymore, or we're just out of touch with our natural environments and the attentiveness that we, I think, probably ages back had to that. And so yes, we are kind of in the water that is slowly boiling up, but I also feel that this is because we've created an environment where we're being so distracted and directed to the wrong kind of information.
Yeah, I agree. And also we probably have lost the channel of knowledge that we had about nature, the channel of transmission of knowledge that we had about nature, about the science of nature, all the native cosmology and all the native information about nature. We do not transmit it to one generation to the other, so we do not recognize the signs of the danger, the signs of the risk. We just learn to recognize as risk what the industries, what the others tell us they are risky, but we do not recognize the signs of nature that can tell us about which risks are we running into. And this is some passage, this is, I mean, some when we became urban societies, we all have become somehow urban societies, also the rural ones. And the urban societies are linear, they live in a linear kind of time in which time is just to be measured, while the time of the rural culture was a round time, was not a line, was seasons, what was circular, was a time in a society in which the living people and the dead ones were together, and they were connected, and humans and animals were connected, and plants were connected. They were not in a situation of separation like the urban culture has taught us to be. And so, yes, you're right. If we still want to understand, to use the story of the frog, if we were wise frog, we could be informed that it is not normal that the water gets warmer. So at the first moment in which we feel it getting warmer, we have to run out from the pot. And maybe the previous generation of frogs could have taught that to us. Say, if it happens to you to be in a pot of water and you feel it getting warmer, please run away. And so if we live separated from the past and from the signs of nature, we end up not recognizing the risk. Yes, you're right. Well, I have to go. Oh,
there's
please.
another question
Yeah,
from
sure.
Enoch. Enoch, do you want to unmute and say it out loud?
I just see your name, Enoch. Where are you?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry, good evening. Sorry I came late, and of course I found some of the things were said, but I still picked interest in most of the things you talked about.
Are you here in the next building?
Yes.
So,
yeah.
Okay, at least one of you is close to me. We could shout from the windows.
Yeah. I picked interest in when you talked about the Italian health system.
Mm-hmm.
I was talking to somebody previously, a colleague, and I told them really about the Italian health system. I appreciate it. I see it like there is a lot that was done. There was a lot of organization, not in the context of everybody, but in the context of where I come from.
Mm-hmm.
And from my country, I noticed something is that there has been a lot of preparations for such pandemics based on the issues that came around in, I don't remember which year it was, about Ebola and cholera.
Mm-hmm. Ebola, cholera, yes.
Yeah, those were serious issues that happened in the country, and they did a lot of preparations. They worked a lot. It would take like almost 5 years to make it done, or 4 or 3, to say that we have made it so well. Or the latest, okay, the earliest would be like 2 years, 1.5, but really that's long for a community like this, that they could handle the situation not more than half a year. So I think it's a success in my own observation. And I would also we also had some issues. Of course, Corona had reached everywhere, even in my country. And we also had an issue about locusts. Locusts came in 2 phases. The first ones came slightly after Corona had attacked China.
Mm.
And the other swarm came after Corona had come to Italy. But they were all serious attacks. And the problem is that as they prepared to deal with the first time swarm, is that they failed to make it work. And even the second time it came, they couldn't make it work. So I was wondering, my question was about preparation. Does preparation make things work, or is the system itself that really doesn't work?
Absolutely.
Issues come.
It's what we were talking, what we're at the beginning, where maybe you were not connected yet. We were talking about anticipatory behaviors. So what I want for my society is not a society in which nobody will get sick, because this is impossible. I want to get out and get sick if I have to. And I want a health system that will take care of me and will recover me. I don't want, I think that in the moment of emergency that we had to pass through because we were not prepared, we needed a moment of segregation because that was the only way we could react in that moment in order to lowering the number of cases. But the reason why we need to lowering the number of cases was that our hospital were not able to get in charge of everyone because we were too many and our hospital were too weak. So if we learn something from this situation is that we cannot have a utopistic situation in which nobody will get sick and nobody will need a hospital anymore in his life. What I want is a prepared country that can react soon and with a scientific, with a research sector very ready to study the new phenomenons and with a public health that can react very soon to what is happening. And I would like to get in a situation in which, of course, if we can avoid disturbing the nature that much, because spillover are also the result of a situation of bad treating of nature, and also the regions that in Italy have been the most hit by the virus are the ones in which industrial agriculture have done the worst and the industries have done the worst. The region in which the air is the most polluted, the region in which the industrial breeding of animal are the most diffused. So I want to change that. I want that my politicians change the way in which we produce our food and the way in which we produce whatever, because we cannot live against nature. We have to live in a way that regenerates the natural resources. But close to that, I want a situation in which preparation is one of the tasks that politicians have is one of the job to be done by politicians. So they have to set a country where problem can happen without becoming disasters. An earthquake can happen without becoming a disaster if the reaction system has been set, if houses are built in a correct way, and if the ones that will crash down will be rebuilt in a decent quantity of time. So you absolutely hit the point. Preparation is the key. Be prepared and know that will not enough, because something that you didn't think can happen, but the system must be prepared to react, to invent quickly a solution in this situation, that precisely about health. But then for the other kind of risk that we have analyzed, of course, the response can be different, and also the perception can be different.
Cinzia, thank you so much. Inspiring as always. And
thank you all. It has been my pleasure. I'm very happy we did it.
Yes. And thanks everyone for joining and sharing thoughts and interesting perspectives of risk.
Okay, take care
Thank
and
you
have
so
a good
much.
evening in the countries where it is evening, and and have a good day in the others. Okay, ciao, take care.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, ciao, ciao.